Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 3, Episode 2 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're into August. It's mock draft season. It's draft season. The NFL preseason Hall of Fame game is Thursday. We're right there. We're just a couple weeks away from NFL football.
It's a beautiful thing. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I know everybody says Christmas, but let's be honest, it's football season. And me and Nick, we always keep the running joke that when football season ends after the Super Bowl, it's mock draft season, it's NFL draft season, it's free agent season. It's always football season, but now it's like actually football season. That's when we get a little more excited, a little more blood starts flowing, if you know what I'm saying.
For football guys, the season just never ends. The season might actually end, but your head's just always on football mode, whether it's free agency, whether it's ranking, Super Bowl predictions, gambling. It just never ends. And that's just kind of the mindset of a football guy. And as a fantasy football guy, every offseason move does impact fantasy in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's minuscule, it does impact in a way. So our heads are always within the game, always within football, and always within the fantasy world of football. So with that said, we have a fun show planned for you guys. A lot of news has transpired over the past 2 weeks, some injuries that we have to talk about. That's kind of how we know that training camp is in full swing. And we're going to go round by round of kind of a mock draft. We're not doing a mock draft per se. We're going to go round by round at the current ADP of players. We're going to tell you our favorite bargains in every round from rounds. I think we're doing round 1 to 12, 10-man draft, something like that. But basically, we're going to give you our favorite and least favorite bargains in your fantasy draft. So if you have a draft coming up, we're going to tell you some players that we like and dislike in each of those rounds. With that said, some plugs are going to get out of the way. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you so much. We've been doing the show for 2 years now. This is Season 3, or third year of the Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Normally, you'll hear from us once a week. Usually every Tuesday, we'll record on a Monday night when I'm off from work, and we'll get you a show on Tuesdays. It is going to be just about every other week for the next couple weeks or so. I do have a vacation or two planned this month, so I'm going to take some time for that. But we will get you content during the month of August so you can get ready for your drafts. And then come football season, we're hoping to ensure that we do have a show for you just about every week. As some of you guys do know, Nick is welcoming his first child pretty soon. I don't know if you kind of want to tell everybody when, but it is coming up.
End of September. So prime football season, week 4, week 5.
Nick's gonna have a football baby.
I'm super excited, but the one game I was looking forward to this year was the Chiefs coming over to MetLife Stadium, and I will be skipping that game just because it's a little too close to the due date, October 1st. We're really looking forward to it, but it's okay.
You'll watch it.
Hopefully, we can watch it on the couch with the child, and that'll be the good luck charm to get over the Mahomes home.
Are you going to any games? Do you have any tickets?
Not yet. I'm definitely going to go to one game before the end of the year. And when the Jets are in the playoffs and we're hosting everybody, I'm going to have to show out.
All right. So anyway, Nick is expecting his first child, which is wonderful. And that's going to happen at the end of September. I have a very time-consuming job. Again, if you go to my social medias, you could see why. But with that said, we are going to try to get you at least one show a week. But if we miss a week, there are definitely reasons that are not slacking or anything like that. There are life reasons in the way, but you can find us just about every single week on all audio streaming platforms and YouTube. If you want to find us on YouTube, it's Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, share with your friends, let them know where you can get some really good fantasy content for absolutely no charge. You can find us on all those audio streaming platforms, including but not limited to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or I believe Spotify, give us that 5-star rating and a review. It really does help boost the algorithm, and we appreciate that. If you're on social media, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are, please follow us, interact with us, like our pages. We appreciate that as well. Twitter and Instagram is Primetime FF Pod. Facebook and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. So first off with the news, we have some unfortunate news that we have to get into. So let's talk about all of it. First off, superstar, number 2 quarterback in the league, Joe Burrow, went down with a calf injury. I think it was Thursday, I want to say. My days do kind of mesh together now, working in the industry I'm in. Did go down with a calf injury, had to be carted off. We were worried about it, but it's not an Achilles, not an ACL, it's a calf. He's expected to be back week 1. The injury timeable is 4 to 6 weeks, was, at the back end of that would put him at week 1. He is going to miss all of training camp and preseason for the second straight season. So, Nick, your thoughts on how this could possibly impact Joe Burrow in his season? And, there's a lot of Bengals at the top of the draft board. Chase and Higgins both going the first 30 picks, and, Joe Mixon in the top 50. So how does this affect your mindset going into draft day for everybody on the Bengals offense?
I mean, last year he had the appendix surgery. He was out for the entire training camp, all of preseason, came back week 1 and started off a little slow. I'm expecting the same kind of thing. I think, he'll be a little less mobile. They're behind a bad offensive or an average NFL offensive line.
I think they're average now. I think they've been
they're average. I mean, they're not great. They're not bad. They're middle of the pack. I think you'll see less mobility for Burrow, but for me, it really does not adjust too much ADP as long as he is back there and ready for week 1. Draft should be at the end of this month or early September, so hopefully we'll have more info on Burrow by then. But I'm not too concerned right now. I like his ADP where he's at, and I wouldn't budget or any of the other Bengals guys based off of this.
Here's the tough thing. The Bengals did have a little bit of Super Bowl hangover last year, but also they didn't really play in the preseason. Joe Burrow didn't. That offensive line didn't, even though they had signed 2 players in the offseason. But that Bengals team started really slow from an offensive perspective because none of them had played preseason. They really weren't in football mode until week 4 or 5. Now, they made the AFC Championship game. We're probably a couple plays away from winning that game. Chris Jones had a ridiculously good sack, I think, late in that fourth quarter, and obviously the penalty on the punt return. So obviously starting slow didn't hurt the Bengals too much, and I don't see that happening again this year, but I could see there being a slow start again for this Bengals offense. I could see it, Joe Burrow taking a couple weeks for him to really heat up, and, how that could kind of affect your fantasy team. So if you drop a game or two because Burrow or Chase or, T. Higgins doesn't play up to expectations, I wouldn't be super worried, because come playoff time, as long as they're healthy, I don't see any reason why that would impact your teams. I do think this is a small positive for Joe Mixon. He did reconstructure his contract. I know there are rumors of him leaving the Bengals, but if Mixon's a bit banged up and they want to run the ball a bit those first 2 games, if Mixon produces, they could keep riding that horse a bit. So I think this might give Mixon a little bit of a notch for me. Not saying a huge one where I'm going to draft him in the first 2 rounds, but I think I'll give him a little bit of a bump. Superstar running back Jonathan Taylor. So I'll read what we have in the little news here. Requested trade from the Colts. Backup running back Zach Moss, broken arm, and is expected out for start of the season. Now, there's a lot to unravel in this Jonathan Taylor saga that's developing. The rumor as of, I think, Saturday night, my days could be foggy here. I think Saturday night, the rumor is that Jonathan Taylor had requested a trade earlier in that week. Jim Irsay puts out a ridiculous statement. Ridiculous. He says something like, if me and Jonathan Taylor died tonight, the world wouldn't remember us. I'm paraphrasing, but Nick, I think I'm kind of correct on my paraphrase.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're spot on.
Ridiculous. Then Taylor puts out a tweet about something. Then the next day, the Colts put out a statement, or not the Colts, not the official Colts, but the rumor from the Colts camp is that they could put Taylor on the NFI list, the NFL or the NFL injured list or something, to where, so I think
it's the non-football related injury where it's like you got injured off site. So by the NFL rule, the Colts can push back his pay till next season and would not have to pay him his salary for the 2023 season.
But is that if he plays or doesn't play?
For the year.
He chose not to play. So yeah. A Le'Veon Bell situation almost.
Correct.
Then Taylor refutes back with a tweet and says, my back never hurt. I don't know where your sources are coming from. I'll let you go first, because I have thoughts on this.
One, I think it's a broken relationship. I thought Jim Irsay was a very good owner up until that moment. I was shocked, to say the least, especially knowing you have a rookie quarterback, a young receiving core, a little bit older of a defense, but a overall young rebuilding football team led by your only superstar on the team in Jonathan Taylor, and you choose to basically break the relationship with him. I thought it was a boneheaded move by the owner. I have no surprise at all that Jonathan Taylor requested this trade. I would expect the Colts to potentially honor this. It did sound like it would only take a second rounder and additional like later draft round compensation to get a deal done. I do think that the AFC East teams are all making that push for Dalvin Cook, all four of them at the moment. And I think whoever doesn't wind up with Cook is going to wind up putting in the trade offer for Jonathan Taylor. So I would expect that he does not start the season as an Indianapolis Colt. Or if the team is too boneheaded and says, we're going to hold you, I am terrified of drafting him in my fantasy drafts if he's not traded at this moment.
Jonathan Taylor is, I'm sorry, Jim Irsay at least is now the worst owner in the NFL. I think that's head and shoulders above at this point. Yeah, I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner in Dynasty, and this, as a Dynasty owner, I actually don't hate this situation because I do hate him on the Colts. The Colts are a rebuilding team with a young quarterback who does have a cannon. I can't judge him just yet. He does have a cannon, but I don't see the Colts scoring a lot of points. If Nick handed me $50 and says, you could bet whatever you want on the Colts this season, I think I would take whatever under their win total is, under their points. I would take all the unders, basically. It's not good for a running back. Not good for a running back, especially one that doesn't catch a lot of balls. The game script for Jonathan Taylor this year just doesn't look that good. Does it mean I'm avoiding him in drafts? No. But does it mean I'm jumping for joy getting him? No. He's a good player on a crappy team, and he's a running back. I would love to see him dealt. I think Miami would be a slam dunk. Take some, pressure off of Tua if Dalvin doesn't go there. That offense is going to be electric. It'll go as far as Tua's head goes, basically. As long as Tua's healthy, that offense is going to put up a lot of points. And, they're a contender in the AFC to make the playoffs. It's going to come down to injuries for every single AFC team. I'm going to say that, from now until the end. If Mahomes gets hurt, I don't care. Kansas City's not making the playoffs. It's coming down to injuries in the AFC.
Yep. Totally agree.
If every team is healthy, the Dolphins got a real shot to make the playoffs, and they're going to run with that offense. So that's a very good opportunity. The Bills, another really good opportunity. The only issue there is Josh Allen does run a lot of balls, and I don't see your Jets getting Jonathan Taylor, so I'm not even going to entertain that. And I don't see the Patriots trading major assets for him either. I would be shocked if Bill Belichick traded like a first-round pick for Jonathan Taylor. So yeah, I think it's enough Taylor talk. Let's get to my Seahawks. Big news of the week is that the Seattle Seahawks are bringing back their original jerseys. They are awesome. They are fire. They are great. I can't wait to see them wear them against the Browns. And I'm going to purchase one. Haven't decided who yet, but I will purchase one. So that's the big Seahawks news.
You need Gino.
I can't invest in Gino jersey.
You hyped him up too much last season, not to. That's your guy. That's your dog.
I think I need a Lockett jersey. I think I do need a Lockett jersey.
Yeah, he's an icon of that team.
At this point, yeah. All right. Kenneth Walker has a groin injury. Now, Pete Carroll did describe this as not lingering or not serious. Again, paraphrasing, but it didn't sound like something that would hold him out to the regular season. As for rookie running back Zach Charbonnet, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Injured shoulder, no timeable for either, but Charbonnet appears to be the more serious injury. Your thoughts?
I really am not sure about this backfield. I don't love taking either at their ADP at the moment, just because of uncertainty. As far as it pertains to Kenneth Walker, he had a very good rookie season, but there's always two injuries. Me and Nick always talk about that we hate groin and hamstring. When we see that word, we know that means you're going to be out on the field and you're going to be at 80% and you're not going to put up your fantasy numbers. So that does give me some concern. I'm happy it's about 5 weeks out from the season versus a week out from the season. So I guess that's something to hold high on. He'll probably miss it. I would expect Seattle does not push him out there, especially knowing Charbonnet is hurt. But my expectation, thinking both was healthy, is that it was going to be like a Breece Hall, Michael Carter situation where I was all over Michael Carter. I loved him. I thought he had a good rookie year. He didn't have Kenneth Walker's rookie year, but he had a very good rookie year. And I said, next year he's going to be great. And they draft a running back with a valuable draft pick in Breece Hall, and he winds up outshining him entirely. Michael Carter becomes the 2. When Breece got hurt, he went back into the 1 role, but they rotated James Robinson, Zonovan Knight. So I was expecting Charbonnet to kind of be more of the guy over there in Seattle, especially with that draft value. But with 2 guys with non-timable injuries, Kenneth might have the lingering one for the year. I'm just going to pivot. I think both are going a little too high for where I want to feel comfortable taking them.
So here's the good thing. We're not drafting for weeks. We definitely aren't. Most leagues should not be. So you will have more clarity on these injuries coming into drafts. I'll say this: if both are starting week 1, I love Charbonnet's value. As of last week, he was going in like round 10. He's a bigger back, catches balls. I see a situation where Charbonnet outscores Kenneth Walker. I see a Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift situation here. I see Charbonnet getting most of the goal line touches since he's the bigger back. And I see him catching more balls than Kenneth Walker does. Even if Walker is the running back on downs 1 and 2, here comes Charbonnet on down 3. And here's the passes. And of course, if Walker does get hurt, then you have a running back 1. So I see Charbonnet as the back that I would rather target based on ADP. But again, the injuries, we don't know. They say it's a shoulder, but again, it can't be something torn. We would have been told by now. It can't be season ending. It would have been torn by now. Could be a sprain or a bruise or whatever. But again, we haven't been told. So going off what we know. Some other running backs. Breece Hall is expected back week 1, but still not ready to play. Outlook for him on the season. I don't know what this means exactly. If he's expected to be back week 1, then I think he would play, I'm assuming.
So my thought, and I'll talk more about him with the ADP game, but I don't love his ADP at all. I think he's going way too high. If he were 100%, I would love his ADP, but we've seen too many guys come off knee injuries and not recover their first year back. So hearing that he's also not going to get reps before the season really does tank his value for me, and it's why I think they're going to look to bring in Dalvin Cook. There was a report today that Dalvin Cook did not seem urgent to sign a contract, so Cook might also be on the back burner and might not sign until 2-3 weeks out from the year just to miss training camp, which I don't love either, but I'm not loving – I don't love for fantasy the Jets' backfield. In terms of production, I think they're going to be very productive this year, but if they bring in Dalvin Cook, you got 5 very solid runners back there, and I don't see any week-to-week consistent elite production from any of them.
I'm not going to make a comment because we'll talk about it in our segment. Garrett Wilson has an ankle sprain, expected to be back week 1. I'm not worried at all. Going to have a really good season. All in on Garrett Wilson this year.
Yep, totally agree.
As for the Broncos, Javonte Williams is cleared for contact at practice. He's not going to be put on the PUP. As a Javonte Williams owner in Dynasty, I love it. He's 23 years old. I don't expect a ton this year. I expect a slow start. I'm not targeting him in a redraft. Well, I would draft him in a redraft league at his current ADP, but I'm not over the moon for him. But if he could stay healthy this year, I think his back half of the season can be much better than his first half.
I agree with that. I think he has very good upside. We drafted him just 1 year ago, expecting him to be a first or second round running back, and he's fallen way down the draft boards, and it's purely because they brought in Samaje Perine. Like, Sean Payton's your head coach. He's got a plan. He's always had dual threat running backs, and both have always put up production. Think about Latavius Murray, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara. All these guys have put up consistent fantasy weeks and seasons.
And Perine doesn't worry me because every team carries 2 or 3 running backs.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a second or third running back. You do. So, speaking of the Broncos, Tim Patrick tore his Achilles, and KJ Hamler is also cut. Does not affect Russell Wilson's value at all to me because wide receiver 3s don't really matter unless you have Jackson Smith and Jigma as your wide receiver 3.
Interesting. Okay, good to know how you feel about Geno. For me, this does affect Russell Wilson's ADP a little bit. I think he's currently going off the board as a bottom 10 running back or quarterback. Apologies, but with all these injuries, just like last year, he's going back in with pretty much an identical offense that he did, except he had Melvin Gordon instead of Samaje Perine. It's like literally the same exact offense. So I know Sean Payton's different there, but Russell Wilson was like under the RB 20 or quarterback 20 last year. Like, I'm not loving his ADP at all, and seeing all these injuries in the same exact offense, no difference except the head coach.
Well, who'd you rather have? Russell Wilson, Anthony Richardson, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr.
I would take Russ over all of those guys. But
well, there you go. That's his ADP. That's where
I would rather have a Jared Goff over him. I would Matt Stafford. I might actually take over him because of they're going to be playing from behind, but I don't love Russell Wilson's ADP.
I think his ADP is exactly where it's supposed to be. He's quarterback 17. I mean, I wouldn't take him over, some of these guys ahead of him, but it's like Those other guys, I mean, what about Daniel Jones? Would you take him over Daniel Jones?
No way. I would take Daniel Jones.
Okay. All right. We're moving on. I'm going to call this segment Value Picks. I'm going to pull up the draft board on Fantasy Pros. Now, this is, I believe, a current draft board, current ADPs for players.
Yep.
Here's what we're going to do. It is PPR, latest ECR. So it's going to be basically a 12-man draft. We are doing 12, right? No, 10.
It's 10-person league, 12 rounds.
Yep. So we're going to go picks 1 to 10, 11 to 20, etc. We're going to give you our best value and lowest value. So, Nick, I'll let you go first. Picks 1 to 10. Who do you like best at their value?
For me, it's going to be Cooper Kupp. It's hard to say anybody in the top 10 is really undervalued or I guess overvalued is fine, but undervalued is very difficult. For me, if I'm drafting in the 1 or the 2 slot, I'm taking Justin Jefferson 1 and I'm taking Cooper Kupp number 2. Since 2021, Cooper Kupp has not posted a season under double-digit fantasy points. And even after Stafford got hurt, he was putting up these same double-digit numbers, 20 points with Baker Mayfield and other backup quarterbacks over there. Also, this is going to be the first time in Kupp's career with Stafford where they're going to be consistently playing from behind. They lost Allen Robinson, who we expected to take targets, and actually did get a ton of red zone work last year. I believe he was the 2nd or 3rd most targeted wide receiver in the red zone, which I could not believe that stat when I saw it, especially knowing the terrible and horrendous numbers he put up. But that combination of Kupp now really having the wide receiver 1 role, and we'll assume most, I imagine, of the wide receiver 2 role, you're looking at a guy that has the potential to get 200 targets in a 17-game season. So Kupp, I think, has the potential to put up those type of numbers. I would not take Chase or McCaffrey above him, but I mean, again, it's hard to put one of these guys above the rest. They're all going to be superstars at this point.
And your lowest value for round 1 as well.
I will say Travis Kelce. Again, hard to really say someone's overvalued, but for me, I do not like taking Kelce at the 6. I still like him closer to that 9 or 10 spot. Last year was kind of a little bit more of an outlier where all the tight ends, like after Kelce, really did not step up or had injuries. Mark Andrews had Lamar get hurt, and I believe he missed a couple weeks last year. Darren Waller missed some time. George Kittle missed some time with leg injuries. TJ Hawkinson was traded midseason. Kyle Pitts, of course, had injuries and really underperformed with lackluster quarterback play. So the 5 tight ends that went right after Kelce, all 5 of them were duds. That's probably not going to happen again. You're probably not going to see that massive gap. So if you're telling me I have Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Austin Eckler, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb on the board, I would take all of those guys before him. It's really around that 9 or 10 spot where I would consider Kelce the slam dunk and lock and loaded player.
So I actually like Kelce's value the best at this point. So here's why. I just don't want a running back. I'm anti-running back. My entire fantasy opinion has flipped in the past 2 or 3 years. I want no part of Austin Eckler in round 1. He was very good last year. Don't get me wrong. He was. It's a preference thing at this point. Don't want Eckler. I don't want McCaffrey. I don't want Saquon Barkley. 3 right there. Jefferson, Chase, slam dunks. Kupp is right there. Hill is right there. Well, Stephon Diggs has a little bit of a beef at Buffalo. Still will have a really good year. If I'm picking 8 or 9, I'll love taking Diggs. CeeDee had a little bit of inconsistencies last year. Travis Kelce's Mr. Consistent with Patrick Mahomes. Over 1,125 yards. I'm using that number because it is his lowest in each of the seasons with Mahomes. Lowest number of receptions, 92. Lowest number of touchdowns, 5. That is an outlier for sure because his other numbers are 10, 11, 9, and 12. There's nobody to throw the ball to over there. There's nobody. There's no receiver. Pacheco's the running back 1, I guess. But again, there's still nobody but Travis Kelce. He's the ultimate safety blanket, the ultimate weapon. The Chiefs going to score the most points in the league probably. So, and most of them are going to go to Travis Kelce. So that is why I think Kelce's value is super duper high. And if you took the positions off, right? if you just took tight end away, and let's say you put wide receiver next to Travis Kelce's name, like, I still think you'd rather have him over some of these receivers. Like, I still think you'd rather have him over Diggs or Lamb or whatever. And I do think that gap between 1 and 2 is going to be pretty large. Who is the bona fide tight end 2 right now? Because I don't think anybody can tell me. Mark Andrews getting drafted high, but let's say Lamar gets hurt. Well, Lamar also runs the ball a lot. They also drafted a receiver. I think there's question marks there. George Kittle, I'm a Kittle owner, and I don't like it. He gets hurt a lot. There's question marks with the quarterback. The offense is loaded, question marks. Darren Waller's kind of fallen off, and now he's a Giant, question marks. I love TJ Hawkinson, but he's getting overdrafted at the moment, I think. I think he's going in rounds 3 or 4. I think it's a little bit overdrafted, even though he finished with a very, very good second half of the season with the Vikings. So that is why I like Travis Kelce a lot in round 1. My least favorite, Saquon Barkley. I'll just make it simple. If I'm picking at 10, you see my mouse right here? A.J. Brown, bing. Devontae Adams, bing. Amon-Ra, bing. Garrett Wilson, bing. I will take all of those guys over Saquon Barkley. He's just on my do not draft list. I just want no part of it. I don't care where he's drafted. He would have to go in like a 3rd round for me to consider Saquon Barkley on my fantasy team. I just, even running back wise, like maybe I'll take a chance at Bijan Robinson. Cowboys going to score a lot of points. Running back 1, Tony Pollard. Nick Chubb, all that he does is get fed the ball in the end zone. I know Kareem Hunt. Derrick Henry at 21. Like come on. Like, I cannot take Saquon Barkley seriously at 10. I can't do it. So on to round 2.
I'm going with Tony Pollard. You mentioned him a minute ago. He's going off the board as the RB5, and I think there's way too much value there at the moment. They chose not to bring in another running back except Ronald Jones, who just got suspended for 2 games for PEDs. Zeke is now gone, who one of my favorite stats ever is that Zeke over the course of his career, every single season, and if you add it, any combination of ways has the most red zone or end zone touches, 3rd and short, 4th and short than any other running back in football. He was literally a workhorse ground and pound guy in that red zone, and he's not there anymore. It's going to be Tony Pollard's game. He's going off the board too late for a running back, in my opinion. He's got the ceiling of the RB1. I think my hot take would be that he finishes as the RB1. And as Nick said, there's really only 2 guys I like drafting over him, which is CMC and Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler, I'm still a little iffy on between the 2 of them, but Tony Pollard, middle of the 2nd round. If you go grab one of those superstar receivers like a Tyreek Hill, a Stephon Diggs, or Cooper Kupp, who's going in that range, and Pollard's there on the board, you literally have the potential for the wide receiver in RB1. It's going to be very hard for any other team to compete with you. I would not like to see that opponent on the other side of me going into a week. For overrated, I'm going with Davante Adams. I feel like I dig on him every single year.
But hate Davante Adams.
But you got to back me up this year. He's got Jimmy G. The only receiver that posted top fantasy numbers was Deebo Samuel. And Deebo earned his points on the ground by literally playing the McCaffrey role of running back, wide receiver combination. So you're talking about a guy who's Davante beyond talented. I would not be surprised if he requested a trade midseason. Come home, come to the New York Jets, come join your guy Aaron and Hackett and that receiver room you know so well. I don't love him. I can't justify taking him over Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. Those 4 guys.
I'm surprised you'd say Waddle.
I would absolutely. You're not wrong because I don't like.
Hold on, time out. No, time out here. I got to call you out right now because you knocked Davante Adams last year because of Derek Carr, and you just named Chris Olave. Are you telling me Olave's a more talented receiver than Davante Adams?
No, but I'm more confident in the Saints in that offense versus Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo posting up top receiver numbers. And you're right. Derek Carr proved me wrong last year. He put up Davante Adams as a top 5 receiver. Jimmy Garoppolo only put up Deebo Samuel, who I just said earned it on the ground. And it was a 1-year wonder, it looks like, at least. So you really just helped me argue my point that Chris Olave with Derek Carr should be above him. Thank you.
I just disagree. I don't even love Davante Adams this year, but one thing we both kind of, at least I echoed this last year. One of the lessons I learned was if you believe in the talent, take him. Tyreek Hill, people faded him last year because of his team and Tua, and look what Tyreek Hill did. I'm not saying that Davante Adams does that, but the talent's not going anywhere. Still has a competent quarterback throwing him the football. He's not going to end the season with 0 targets. So
I didn't say
I
that.
think
I
he'll
just
still
said
have a
there's 4
fine
receivers I
season.
like better than him.
It's fair. So my favorite, what sucks is I love AJ Brown a lot. I really do. I think he should be a first round guy. So I wish these numbers were a little bit different, but for the sake of the segment, Garrett Wilson at 15 is really looking appetizing to me. All in on the receivers. Now let's talk about Davante Adams for a second. Garrett Wilson last year, 83 receptions, 111 yards, 4 touchdowns. I'm going to try to find a season that's comparable. So Davante Adams, let's go to 2016. Played 16 games, 75 receptions, 121 targets, 997 yards. So the yards a little low, 12 touchdowns. Let's look at another season. He played 14 games. Let's go to 2021. He played 16 games here, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. I see Garrett Wilson here, 1,100 yards again. I know it's a little low, but I see 1,000 to 1,100 yards. I see roughly that range. For that touchdown number, let's spike it up. I see a double-digit touchdown season for Garrett Wilson. I see 85 to 90 targets. I don't see many of the receivers that Aaron Rodgers will be throwing the ball to. I think he trusts Garrett Wilson. And when Rodgers finds a guy that he trusts, he just slings him the ball. Jordy Nelson, Davante Adams, Randall Cobb. I don't think there's anybody else on that offense that Rodgers will trust. A lot of young receivers, a lot of players he's never played with. And I think you still have Cobb and one other guy that he played, Lazard. But I think the trust factor is going to be there. And Garrett Wilson is a superstar. I'll go all in on Garrett Wilson in the middle of the second round right there. Let's go to round 3. Picks 20 to 30.
Can I make there's 2 things. One, I got to make a quick remark about that. And then you got to do your most overrated player.
You're right. I do.
I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the last episode we recorded of season 2 and what you said about Garrett Wilson?
I remember nothing in the past 8 years.
I said Garrett Wilson, if Aaron Rodgers came here and Garrett Wilson was the Jet and we expected the expectations with Rodgers coming, he would be drafted at the end of the second round. And you know what you told me?
I don't.
I remember because it left the imprint in my brain. You disrespected my Jets. You said, and I quote, "There is not a shot in hell I would touch a New York Jet with Aaron Rodgers."
Well, I don't like Aaron
ADP
Rodgers,
especially. So
you're right. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I don't.
But that was music to my ears. Go on. Who's overrated next from the second round?
I really like this second round. These are all the guys that I think should go in the second round. Minus a couple in the third. I think until Jonathan Taylor's situation is figured out, I think he's a little bit overrated. Now, right now, right? We're talking, if we drafted today, I would take Nick Chubb over him. I would take Josh Jacobs over him and Derrick Henry. I think I would have Taylor at 23, right where Ramondre Stevenson is.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'd go with Taylor. I really like this second round. There's really nobody I don't like. Like, this is a solid spot for Bijan Robinson, and he's a guy you're either going to like him or don't like him. That's the end of story with him. Okay, let's move on to round 3. Who do you got?
My most underrated is Derrick Henry. I talked a little bit about him at our mock draft 2 weeks ago.
I'm right with you.
He's going off the board as the RB8, which doesn't sound terrible. Last year, when running backs were 8 of the first 12 picks. When you have an opportunity to take Derrick Henry in the 3rd round of a 10-man league, think about it. You have the number 1 overall draft pick. Let's just say you got the ADP picks of who's at your range and who's on the board. You take Justin Jefferson, number 1, and you take Chris Olave as your wide receiver 1, and then you get Derrick Henry. Nobody is stopping that team. That is going to be near impossible if those guys stay healthy, their quarterbacks stay healthy. Like, it is a deadly, deadly trio. And not to mention the main reason I love Derrick Henry this year, not enough fantasy football podcasts are talking about this at the moment. In the week 15 and 17, he plays the Houston Texans.
This stat. You love this stat.
It's phenomenal. And
it's an awesome stat.
Henry. against them, he averages over 30 points on the ground, not including any passing work. So in your wild card week and your championship week, if he stays healthy, you're pretty much locking in 30 points from your RB1 or 2 or RB2 at this ADP. So I cannot like stop drafting him. In sleeper, he's going as like the 16th or 17th pick. And even there, I love him as a draft.
How many leagues are you in this
This
year? Do you know?
5.
I think I'm in 4. I would bet you money that in our combined leagues, Derrick Henry goes within the top 15 in like at least 70% of them.
Absolutely.
Do you know
ADP that's wrong.
Derrick Henry's my pick too, but I'll give a different one for the fun of it. But did you look at his stats from last year? If not, guess them. Tell me his yards and his touchdowns.
Who, Henry?
Yeah, 2022.
2022. Well, wasn't he injured for part of it?
Guess his stats. Just guess them.
1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns.
Higher. 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. And he's being drafted as the running back 8. And they just signed DeAndre Hopkins, who is going to open up the field for him even more. Traylon Burks also coming back. Sleeper tight end. I am not a Titans fan at all. Nick knows I do not like the Titans. Vrabel's a great coach, but they're just boring. They're a boring team, but I will slam dunk Derrick Henry in the 3rd round. Somebody else I really like in the 3rd round. Well, I like a lot of these guys. I do. Like this is just where I'm going to like win the draft.
I do have to tell you, like, and I know you said this the last 2 rounds, like I really like these guys or these ADPs. Like I genuinely believe this is the first year where I can't be like super like this guy is not the guy, this guy is the guy. Like I really do feel like this far out, like this has been the best that most rankings have been.
Yep. I'll go with Chris Olave. I love attacking wide receivers in their 2nd year, especially ones that did produce a solid number. Last year, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 72 receptions with Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Taysom Hill, and I think somebody else played quarterback for the Saints. Now with Derek Carr, and as much as people like to knock Derek Carr is throwing for like 3,000 yards every season. His stats, he has thrown for 4,000 yards in 4 of his last 5 seasons. Last year, 3,500 yards. He has thrown for over 23 touchdowns or more in his last 3 seasons. A lot of those are going to go to Olave. Again, they don't have anybody. Who's the right? I think it's Michael Thomas is still there, but is he really there? Is Michael Thomas really a person? Like, he's a guy. So Olave is the guy for me. I don't think you gave the guy that you dislike because I jumped on the Henry train, and that's okay.
So I literally wrote, and this is my first note for this player, I really did not think anyone was overrated at this round. Like ADP really does feel
it's
really
Keenan
good
Allen, isn't it?
Guys. No, it's DK Metcalf.
Okay.
He's right at the end of the round. He's a literal last pick of the round. And for me, the only reason really is there's so much competition on his team. They just drafted a rookie. Tyler Lockett really did feel like the wide receiver 1 from a fantasy perspective. Last year, they got a dual-headed running back group, it looks like. So, and I don't think Geno Smith is going to be great again. Like he was a top 10 quarterback on the season last year. I think he's probably closer to that, 16 to 20 range as a quarterback, which is no disrespect to him. I just think quarterback is really good in the NFL, and I don't think he's going to be that guy again. So DK is a good player, but I don't think on a week-to-week basis he's going to have the same consistency as the rest of the guys in this round.
I have Keenan Allen. He's getting old. I think he's 30. Gets hurt. A lot of competition on that team, especially from the receiver position. Eckler eats up a lot of balls. Mike Williams, when he's healthy, eats up a lot of balls. They drafted Quentin Johnson. And I actually like DK Metcalf. He's the alpha dog over there. I know Tyler Lockett's outscored him 2 of his 3 seasons in the NFL. But still the wide receiver 1, still a big body. And then right behind him, you have guys like Amari Cooper. I really like Jerry Jeudy coming up. I like some of these other values better. DeAndre Hopkins isn't getting enough love right now. I know his quarterback situation is going to be bad, but again, believe in the talent. I don't believe in Keenan Allen. I don't. So there were a slew of guys. Like I'd rather have T. Higgins 2 picks before Keenan Allen. So
I don't love Allen's ADP, but he did, once returning from his hamstring injury that lingered for like 10 weeks, he was the wide receiver 4 from that week on, which is the only reason I get the ADP for him, but the injury does concern me.
My other note here is quarterback. One of them is going to justify the ADP. The other two won't. It's a tough gamble to take. Round 4, who do you got? 31 to 40. So you're ending at Chris Godwin.
And
this is my least favorite round by a mile, by the way.
Oh yeah. I agree with you. My most underrated is going to be Calvin Ridley.
Interesting.
About 2 weeks ago, I did not love Calvin Ridley's ADP. I really thought, he's going to come out of this. He's going to have a slump. He's been off the football field for a year now. And then I started listening to more podcasts talking about him and his production. And there was one line that really stuck with me, and it's, don't forget, Calvin Ridley's the guy the Falcons chose to pay and put on the field over Julio Jones. They were happy to let him walk, and they were absolutely right. And I heard that, and then I saw the clip that I believe everybody must have seen by this point of Zay Jones, a very fast NFL receiver, running a route and it looking like a good route, and then Calvin Ridley doing it in what looked like 2 times speed or fast forward on your DVR. It was absolutely phenomenal. And now Calvin Ridley has a chance to shine on probably the best offense where he's been the wide receiver 1 on in his career, with the most talented quarterback of his career in the easiest division that he's had in his career. So it's a lot of check marks for a guy that you can, if you go wide receiver heavy, will be the wide receiver 3 on your team. If not, as a low end wide receiver 2, because you stacked a guy like Derrick Henry with a Josh Jacobs or something like that.
Okay. And then the player you do not like.
I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's Breece Hall. You guys know I'm the resident Jets fan on the show. It's looking a lot more and more like a split backfield, and he's not going to return for reps before the season starts. You're looking at Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight, and there's a rookie named Israel. I forget his last name, but it's a long one. So don't be surprised if you watch all 3 of these backups get reps, and they are still in talks with Dalvin Cook. If Dalvin Cook does sign, you're going to see Dalvin's ADP rise, and Breece Hall probably fall to the 4th or 5th round, which is more respectable. But I don't see me taking Breece Hall at all this year unless if he falls beyond the 6th round. So I'm not going to justify taking him at this point.
I like Najee Harris, and here's why. Over him, and then he came into the season with that nagging injury last year. He's not coming in with a nagging injury this year. I think the foot's been fixed. His stats in his rookie season, which people really jumped all over, and I think Najee Harris won me the points in our league. I think. Yep. Mm-hmm. So he's always one of my guys now because he won me money. That's just kind of how it works. You're on the battlefield with me now. Rookie year, 1,200 yards exactly, 7 TDs, just rushing. Last year, 1,000 yards and 7 TDs. I feel like we all thought he was much worse than that last year. The numbers don't say so. Coming in healthy. I don't know if you've seen the buzz, but Kenny Pickett's getting some buzz. Do I believe it? Not necessarily, but, he's had a year under his belt with Tomlin. And you know this just as well as I know this. Tomlin does not lose. He doesn't lose. He doesn't have losing seasons. The Steelers are just not going to have losing seasons under him. And for the Steelers to win football games, they have to play defense, take the pressure off of Kenny Pickett, and run the football. The Najee Harris recipe. I don't love a lot of these players in this round. I don't even love Najee Harris, but I think it's good value. If I'm going, let's see, if I'm going right off the top, if I'm going Kelsey, Garrett Wilson's 2, Henry 3, and then Najee 4, I'm all over it. I'm just all over it. And if I don't take Henry here, I'm going another receiver. And
that's a very heavy volume team. There's a lot of touches on that team between all of them, including Najee.
And I love volume. Okay, player I don't like is Calvin Ridley. And we were originally going to do boom and bust, and I do have some notes for Ridley on bust. Christian Kirk last year with the Jaguars, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. that doesn't just disappear. And now here's what does scare me about this situation. I was all over Robert Woods 2 years ago. I said Stafford's going to throw a lot to Robert Woods. It's kind of right. Stafford made a receiver really, really good. I was 30% right. I picked the wrong receiver. I'm a little worried about picking the wrong receiver again, but I'm putting my my eggs into Christian Kirk because I like his ADP more. Calvin Ridley right here. His ADP is roughly 88-48, I think. Actually right here it's raised to 38. Christian Kirk's looking at like 67. That's a guy, again, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. Christian Kirk's also 26. Calvin Ridley is about to be 30. Hasn't played a football game in almost 2 years. I know he's on the field. 2 years is a long time to not play football. Ridley also only has 1 season over 1,000 yards. I'm just saying, I really like that ADP. I know Calvin Ridley has the talent, but I feel like we're running into a more Le'Veon Bell situation where a guy hasn't played in a long time, a former superstar, and here we are. So those are my worries with Calvin Ridley. Let's go to round 5. 41 here, Lamar Jackson to Christian Watson. What do you got?
You are going to be shocked at who I say is underrated because I have never given these guys their flowers ever. It's 2 people. I love taking quarterback here. I would go Lamar and Burrow. I think that there's a clear drop-off in talent between the 4th and the 5th round.
It's fair.
And here is where you have the opportunity to take your slam dunk home run quarterback with QB1 upside and all the potential that you want. The 4th or 5th running back quarterback off the board. I really cannot find a reason not to like him. And every single week, you're looking at a guy that could be the QB1. So, I mean, if you're not going to go take one of those early 3 guys, which me and Nick would both say do not take them because of opportunity cost, you can take a guy like this 2 rounds later. I would absolutely smash quarterback in this round. I think that's where you have your drop-off in talent. My most overrated is going to be Drake London. He did have a very good rookie showing at the start, and then he seemed like he fell off a cliff, trailed behind guys like Olave and Garrett Wilson. And the team has clearly put the emphasis that Kyle Pitts is still going to be a focal point of that team. Bijan Robinson clearly will be the focal point of the team. I think he's going to have a massive workload in the passing and the running game right out of the gate. You could see it in practice. He's even lining up on the outside as well, which is going to take away targets from Drake London to begin with. I think it's very possible you're looking at a sophomore slump. And when you're looking at a guy going in the 5th round and you're saying, oh, he's the 3rd option on his team, I really do not like it. And then you also factor in that you have Desmond Ridder, who there is 0 certainty towards at quarterback. I'm really not loving the ADP here.
Love your take on the quarterbacks. The one other player I really like here is Jerry Jeudy. Last year, 67 receptions, 67 targets on 100 receptions for 972 yards and 6 touchdowns, all career highs for Jerry Jeudy. Russell Wilson should be healthy this year as long as he doesn't miss a couple games. Jeudy was also missed a couple games last year. New coach Sean Payton. We've seen what wide receivers have done with Sean Payton. We've seen, Jimmy Graham wasn't a receiver, but he basically was a receiver. Marquise Colston. Michael Thomas. Like, there's so many receivers that have gone through the Saints and had spectacular numbers. I think the same could happen for Jerry Jeudy. Love his ADP. I think this is a guy, again, not going to put up cup numbers, but I think it's a guy where you're getting around 5 that could end up being a guy who really should outperform their ADP. Player I don't like, DJ Moore, and just the Bears. Like, the combination of DJ Moore and the Bears, it's just like, it's a match made. It's a guy that I
really
fade.
wanted to say him. It's
a guy that I fade every single year. I always fade him.
If there's a my guy section for, like, everybody has their my guy, DJ Moore is me and Nick's not my guy.
No,
like, we hate.
And like, he's like solid. I mean, he's good for like 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, he's okay, I guess. The position's just so deep. Like, no. Okay, round 6. We're looking at picks.
Tyler Lockett.
Yeah. I would like to talk
Mike
to
Williams.
TJ Hawkinson. Yep. Okay. What do you got?
I am looking.
You like Marquise Brown a lot.
I do like Marquise Brown. I love him, but there's one more guy that I do love their ADP a little bit more than Hollywood. It's Brandon Ayuk. He really got he got the nicknames were Brandon I Puke 2 years ago when you took him in the 4th or 5th round, and he literally started the season with 0 targets, 0 catches, 0 fantasy points, and
So
everybody
bad.
threw him on his bench after that. Last year, from week 6 on, he was the wide receiver 10 in all of fantasy football in points per game. So you're looking at a guy who proved over a 12-week span, 11 games if you count the bye week at that point, in points per game was a top 10 receiver, and now he's going off the board as a wide receiver 4, being the 31st wide receiver off the board. Technically, the first wide receiver 4, but anyways, you're looking at your second flex play. You're looking at your first bench guy, depending on how deep your league goes. That ADP, that spot for Brandon Ayuk, you're looking at literally a slam dunk home run if he can put up the top 10 points per game averages. The overrated guy, a guy I have loved for the last 2 years, but unfortunately just could not execute. It's Michael Pittman. His ADP is right now the wide receiver 28. I'm looking at the next 5 receivers off the board. You're looking at Brandon Ayuk, Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, Mike Evans, and you got to dig a little bit deeper. Jahan Dotson going after him. I would take every single one of those guys, no questions asked, as a home run over Michael Pittman. You're looking at Anthony Richardson, who's going to have significantly less passing volume. He's going to have more of the Justin Fields play style, less targets to go around to your receivers. You're not going to be scoring a lot of points. There's not a lot of touchdown upside. And last year, we really hoped for a sophomore like elevating point where you had Matt Ryan, who was going to throw the ball 40 times a game, and he literally could not do it. His numbers were absolutely horrendous. For me, if he hits his ceiling this year, and he's going as a wide receiver 28, it's a low-end wide receiver too. Like, I do not want to chase that upside. That does not win you a fantasy championship. A guy like a Brandon Ayuk or a Mike Williams or a Marquise Brown can win you a fantasy championship. So for me, Pittman is one of the biggest fades. I think his ADP is going to drop exponentially over the next few weeks.
So I already told you how much I like Christian Kirk. So he would be my my ADP best value here. But I'll give you one more. If you haven't attacked quarterback yet, here's Justin Herbert, because he is a stat sheet stuffer, and we love stat sheet stuffers in fantasy football. 3 straight seasons over 4,000 yards, 3 seasons with over 25 touchdowns. No playoff wins, but you don't need that in fantasy football, so don't have to worry about playoff Justin Herbert. So he's good for your regular season, so he's a great fantasy football quarterback. He's great at fantasy football. Now, I hope he doesn't play many primetime games, because I'm a little worried he's in that Kirk Cousins category. Not as bad in primetime, but I can't really tell you what signature win Justin Herbert has on his resume from a fantasy football perspective.
Kansas City 2 years ago, but
that's a while ago. Okay, if the Chiefs have beat them in like 6 straight games, I'm not going to remember the one loss.
2, but
something like that. But anyway, Justin Herbert, stat sheet stuffer. He's going to do very well for your fantasy team. That's an inside rib because Nick's a big Herbert guy and I am not. But that's okay. My take is 100% serious as to where he is going to put up a lot of points. Player I don't like is Kenneth Walker. I love my Seahawks, but 23% of his attempts that went like in between 2 yards or less went for 0 or negative yards. That's not great. They drafted Zach Charbonnet in round 2, who's going to be the bigger back. The goal line carries. Walker's ADP was at 35. Now it's at, where are we now? 57. So it's already dropped. And Charbonnet's roughly around 10. So I'll take Charbonnet for that reason. Pick 61. We're in round 7. I see a guy that Nick really loves right off the bat. So 61 to 70. Who do we got?
My absolute must-take guy right here, RB22 off the board, Alexander Madison.
Good one.
The team has been praising him, and the coaches literally came out and said he will be a 3-down back like Dalvin Cook was. There is 0 reason Alexander Madison should be going anywhere after the 4th round after hearing those words from the coach. Dalvin has been a perennial RB1 in his career, a top 10 running back when healthy in points per game since 2018, which was his second year in the NFL. The Vikings have averaged top 5 in points per game during Dalvin Cook's time there. I'm expecting massive production. You're looking at a guy that's going to be locked into 15 to 20 rushing attempts per game and a very high volume, high scoring offense. You're looking at a team that's going to average 28 to 32 points per game. There's no bigger slam dunk at this round. There's zero reason he should be going as an RB3 for a team. For me, he is a locked and loaded RB2 with the ceiling of being the RB6 through 10. Like, you do not see that ceiling this late into drafts typically. There's no reason he should be going where he is. Keep in mind also, when he was a backup running back, when you just took him as a handcuff, he was literally going off the board in the 9th and 10th round. Like, there's no reason he should only have a 2-round bump up from that. Like, it's the 1 ADP that I looked at, and I'm like truly baffled that experts have him ranked this low. The one guy, however, right after him that I do not love, who I did love last year, is Dameon Pierce. He's a very talented running back, but he saw practically no passing game work last year. They give it all to Rex Burkhead, which proves the coaching incompetencies. They also brought in Devin Singletary, who unfortunately will vulture a lot of touches from that running back crew. So no targets, low offensive ceiling. He's very talented, do not get me wrong, but you're going back-to-back with a guy that I think is a home run smash. And the guy above Madison, the guy under him, Rachaad White and James Conner, both of them also have massive upside and massive workload that they're going to see this year. So you're looking at, in my opinion, in a 4 running back run of 4 runners, the absolute worst pick. And usually if 3 running backs go off the board first, you want to pivot to a different position. So for me, there's no reason to take Dameon Pierce here.
If you're taking receivers early, these next 2 rounds are your running back rounds, then I think this is going to really change the fantasy landscape, how these drafts are kind of going. Mike Evans, man, I just don't care who's throwing him the ball at this point. Mike Evans has had 1,000 yards in every single season. The touchdowns are a little bit low last year, only 6. But if the Bucs are really bad by week 5, where the trade deadline is, and Mike Evans goes to a contender, and you drafted Mike Evans with pick 63, I'm just saying, if he goes to your Jets, if he goes to the Bills, if he goes to the Chiefs, like the numbers that Mike Evans will put up for you in the second half of the season, it's a gamble. I wouldn't draft Mike Evans assuming he's going to be traded, but I would draft him knowing that, again, believe in the talent every season. I think it's like 11 seasons in a row or something with 1,000 yards, believe in the talent. And you're still getting a really solid receiver. And if he's your bust, if Mike Evans is your bust at pick 63, then I don't think you drafted bad. You took a chance on a guy who's very, very good, has minimal injury history. He's not 32 just yet, or maybe he is. What's his age now that I think about it? I'm not going to change my take. He could be 40 and I really wouldn't change my take.
Yeah.
He's 29. So it's like he's not even 32. He will be 30 in like 3 weeks, but still. I think he's good for another season or 2. So I would take Mike Evans here. I do not like J.K. Dobbins. I was really excited for this one. He's never seen more than 24 touches in a game. He has threats from both Lamar Jackson and the Gus Bus. He has injury history on top of injury history. I think he's already injured. His ADP was 47. Now it's dipped a little bit. But again, I would rather take Miles Sanders, who I don't even love. I'd rather probably take a chance on Cam Akers because everybody's forgetting the Rams are solid.
Yep.
James Conner, I actually really like his value here. I really do. Madison, you're explained. And I like Pierce, White, etc. So, there's J.K. Dobbins, your odd man out. 71, starting with Dallas Goedert, going down to 80. Javonte Williams, what do you like?
So here's where I'm pulling my tight end. I'm pulling the trigger. I'm not going for Goddard, I would go for Goddard happily. I will never touch Kyle Pitts with a 10-foot stick ever again.
I traded for him last year.
I am going with Darren Waller. Every report out of Giants camp has been that his performance is jaw-dropping. Not a single member of the secondary, who was actually a very solid secondary last year, has been able to keep up with him. Daniel Jones has outright said he's been my favorite target out on the field, and they used a high draft compensation to go land Darren Waller in a 3rd rounder. That receiving core has been lackluster for for years. They overpaid Kenny Golladay a few years ago to try and bring in talent after they lost Odell, and they have never recovered. Darren Waller is the key to them recovering, and I think he's going to look a lot more like he did 2 years ago than he did last year. So I think that's a absolute slam dunk for your fantasy team, and there's no reason I would not pull the trigger on him. The one guy that I do see here and does have me questioning it is Treylon Burks. He is a very solid player, and I did like him a lot last year. I thought he'd take over the AJ Brown role. They used the first round pick on him, and he was absolutely horrendous his rookie year. He does have the chance for the sophomore breakout, but if I'm looking at the rest of the board and I see a guy like Jordan Addison in a team that's a very high volume, high scoring team, I like taking him at receiver. I see Jackson Smith in the Jigba, Seattle. I don't love taking all their receivers, but a Tyler Lockett goes down with age or DK Metcalf misses weeks with hamstring injuries. Like, that's an instant plug and play in your lineup. Like, I don't think there's going to ever be a week you have Treylon Burks and you're comfortable putting him in your starting lineup. And for me, that's a reason not to take him in what's either going to be your first bench spot or your second flex option, depending on how many starters you have in your league.
I like George Pickens. Rookie season last year, 800 yards on 52 targets and 4 touchdowns. He seemed to develop a rapport with Kenny Pickett over time. He seemed to be the wide receiver one over there, lapping Deontay Johnson, lapping Pat Freiermuth, who's not a receiver, but again, catches the ball. If you could get a potential wide receiver one this late in the draft, again, I just think it's a slam dunk. I do not like Jackson Smith-Njigba. And here's the thing. I don't know if you've seen the reports, Nick. I know I obviously follow a lot of Seattle people. He's lighting it up. Like, they are all over him at camp, all over him, making every play. He's quick. He looks great. He's a great football player. But we're talking fantasy football. Now, where is the volume coming in? DK Metcalf doesn't disappear. I know Tyler Lockett did outscore him last year, but DK is still the 6'2" behemoth who they're paying big money to. But, he's going to get balls. Tyler Lockett, he's a little bit older. That's okay. He's still going to get a lot of balls. So where does Jackson Smith-Njigba really figure into this offense? I think he's a great dynasty acquisition, especially I have the 5th pick in my dynasty league, and I have Tyler Lockett. I might draft him to replace Tyler Lockett. I don't know how much he plays for me this year, but I might draft him just so I have that Seahawks receiver in the future. But you're talking a redraft league, and you're telling me what I rather want. Wide receiver 2 on Washington is going to, on Minnesota, going to put up a lot of points. I know you don't like Treylon Burks. I think I'd rather have Treylon Burks. George Pickens, wide receiver 1. There's just other guys I think I'd rather have than Jackson Smith-Njigba. So that's the only reason why. I'm elated he's a Seahawk. I love the pick. As a Seahawk fan, I'm stoked. The offense is going to be so much fun to watch if Geno doesn't revert back to Jets Geno Smith or Giants Geno Smith, or I think he was a Charger. Point being, if Geno plays like last year with this offense, they're going to be awesome. And I'm going to have so much fun watching while again, you know what I do for a job. I'll put it that way. Anyway, next round, I think it's round 9, I want to say. David Montgomery to James Cook. What do we got?
I'm going Alvin Kamara. You're taking him in the 9th round. You're taking a guy that I know last year did have some struggles, and of course he has his off-the-field issues. The dude can flat out ball. He was drafted the same year as your Dalvin Cooks, your Christian McCaffreys, your Joe Mixons, guys you're happily starting this year. So he might be a little bit older, but he's got a great situation. He's got a quarterback in Derek Carr, who just assisted in Josh Jacobs putting up a top 5 fantasy season. I am a little worried about the Jamal Williams split, but just a couple years ago, Latavius Murray, Mark Ingram filtered in, and all that beautiful duos managed to put up consistent top fantasy weeks, and both of them finished within the top 15 running backs. You're taking him off the board as the RB28. There's practically no risk for a guy that, was pretty much locked and loaded to a 20-point game. So I'm more than happy to pull the trigger on him here. The guy I absolutely hate and cannot justify taking any draft is Juju Smith-Schuster, going off the board at 88. He is such a clear drop-off, and you could see the tier break here on the sheet between it. There's no reason for me to take him. He does not create separation. The Patriots are in an absolutely terrible division. an elite division, and they have the worst receiving core in football. There's a reason that the Chiefs had absolutely no problem letting him walk in what was a weak offense, and we know that the Patriots' history has been being terrible evaluators of the receiver position. I really think that they messed up by giving Juju this contract, and I do not want to see him on my fantasy team. I look forward to watching Sauce hold him to 0 targets for 0 catches and 0 yards and 0 touchdowns, and him TikTok dancing and crying all the way to the locker room.
I think I'm right with you there on Kamara. I also like Montgomery's value. I like following the money. The Lions chose to pay him. I know they drafted, Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think Gibbs is going to be a stud, but they chose to pay Montgomery knowing that they could potentially draft Gibbs. So I'm going to follow the money a little bit here. He's going to be on a better offense. I mean, he's at over 800 yards in all 4 of his seasons. I know it's not a lot, but again, the Bears, not a lot of opportunities. He's at over 5 touchdowns in all those seasons. Again, the Bears, not a lot of opportunities. I don't expect him to catch a lot of balls, but I think he's your goal line back. And honestly, he's your with Derrick Henry. They are your playoff fantasy backs. They just always find a way in the playoffs. So I think he's a solid pick there. As for who I don't like, Juju's right there. I don't like Juju, and I'll leave it at that. Alrighty, round 10, starting at 91, Quentin Johnson going to Evan Ingram. What do you like?
I love Dalvin Cook here. I think he's going a little bit outside. It's actually funny because I did the notes for the show yesterday, and now I look at it, and it's literally like 2 ADP off because I have him here going off the board as the 99th player, and here he's now the 101th. But I have notes for it, so you're going to hear it even though he's a little bit later. No matter what, he is going to the AFC East. No matter which situation he goes to, I like taking him as the 33rd or 31st or 32nd running back off the board. Again, I said it earlier with Madison. You're talking about a guy who's been a perennial top 10 running back. You're not taking him at the ADP that you took your David Johnson or your Le'Veon Bell when they made those monumental career-changing trades or whatever. You're taking him off the board as your 2nd or 3rd bench player. You do not have that opportunity or that upside this late in drafts. If he's an absolute failure of a pick on the New England Patriots, which I think is the worst situation he can go to, so what? He rides your bench and you don't play him the entire year. Someone will trade you for him off the name value alone. If he goes to Miami, that's the biggest slam dunk that he can have. Goes to an absolutely electric offense that runs that 49ers running scheme with Mike McDaniel as the head coach, and a very, very, very high-scoring offense with a lot of end zone and red zone touches for him and his safety outlet. Tua is not going to run the ball. There's too much concern about his head and his injuries. Whatever the running back is there is going to be your check down back. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going to get open everywhere across the field, but it takes them 3 to 4 seconds to break that barrier and for Tua to get them the ball down the field. You will have a lot of those check downs and a reliable running back. If Dalvin Cook goes to the Jets, again, I talked about the running back by committee, but you're talking about a Jets offense that I'm expecting to be in the top half of offenses in the league. A lot of these other running backs are not in that position at this ADP. I think you absolutely have to smash it. The one guy I think is overrated here is Dak Prescott. He's going off the board as the QB 10, which isn't a terrible ADP for him. But I look at a guy like Tua in a loaded offense. I'd much rather have him. Daniel Jones was a top running back last year, and he is Vanilla Vic for sure. He gets it done on the ground. We talked about the Vikings earlier, QB 13, Kirk Cousins. I love the offensive intensity. I love how many points they consistently put up per game. Geno Smith was a top 10 quarterback last year, or just outside. A very high-powered offense. Dak, very high-powered offense. Don't get me wrong, but they just lost Dalton Schultz, one of his biggest safety blankets, and Kellen Moore, who was the best offensive coordinator in football for the last 2 years, who winded up going to the Chargers. Nick talked about Justin Herbert earlier. I would have absolutely loved to talk about it, but I talked about the other 2 quarterbacks around earlier, so I didn't really want to discuss him. But you're talking about a guy where his ceiling and his floor is probably at this RB10, at the 10 or a little bit lower. I don't think he's going to give you those week winning games like a Daniel Jones or those other guys.
I like Antonio Gibson a bit here if I can't get Dalvin Cook. It's a chance at getting a running back 1. I know he was disappointing, but last year, but I think there's a chance for a rebound here with Antonio Gibson. I think he has the catching upside. I don't think Brian Robinson's going to catch a ton of balls. So I think you're looking at a guy who could be a PPR, steal later in drafts. I'm not saying he's going to be, but I think he's worth stashing on your bench just in case. A guy I don't like, Elijah Moore. I'm so out on Elijah Moore. I've been so out on Elijah Moore. I think he's like the fourth option on this offense behind Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, David Njoku, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, I don't care what his ADP is. You're just never going to see me go out there and draft Elijah Moore. It's just not going to happen. Okay. 101 to 110. I guess you jumped Dalvin Cook. That's okay, though.
Yeah, just by a little bit, but I'm going to go a little bit further down. The guy I do love here is Khalil Herbert. I've talked about the talent of him for the last 2 years. They happily let David Montgomery go, and they brought in Dante Foreman. The two of them will be, I would say a two-headed monster, but it really is not a monster at all. It's just a two-headed running back crew with Justin Fields. That team is ground and pound all day between the three of them. I think it's one of the only guys where if you're missing your running back due to an injury or a bye week, this late in the draft, there's not a lot of guys you're going to feel comfortable plugging and playing. If you go 0 RB, he is the perfect draft pick at this spot. RB 35, you're taking him as pretty much a fourth running back on your team. There's no doubt that is a good value for him and a very good reason to take him alone. I did talk about him a little bit ago over Dak Prescott. I do love Daniel Jones. He is a mobile beast. He did do very well last year from a quarterbacking perspective. He did get a playoff win as Nick Judge's all quarterbacks by, unlike that guy Justin Herbert, which means he's now an elite quarterback and elevated to that top 10 in skill-wise. But he just got a massive upgraded wide receiver or tight end in Darren Waller. That receiving core has never been healthy. They're going all into the season, all healthy. It's a good situation for Jones, and he's going into what will be one of the tougher schedules that he's had to face this year. But if you're taking him as the 12th quarterback off the board as your backup, I think he's absolutely going to be startable week to week. So that for me, that's a reason not to take quarterback in the early rounds and to trust him getting you those 19 to 22 points per game.
I would take Zay Flowers for the sole reason of rookie receiver, drafted high. I love taking a chance on rookie receivers. Team's also going to score a lot of points. The Ravens are going to score a lot of points. It's a lot of upside for him, yards, touchdowns, etc. He may be the third option on the offense to start the season, but towards the end, he could end up being 1 or 2. Player I don't like. I mean, I kind of like them all at this current ADP. I mean, the quarterbacks are fine. I guess I'll say Njoku because there's just other options, I guess. But I mean, there's really nobody I dislike at this ADP. I guess Brian Robinson only if I believe in Antonio Gibson, but the rest of these are fine. Nobody I really dislike. Okay, last round we're doing. It's going to be 110 to 121. We're a little bit down if you want. And this will be your 12th round. This will be your 12th round for like and dislike. Who do you got?
I love Nico Collins this season. This is ECR that we're going off of. So Fantasy Pros takes the ratings of, I think it's 120 different analysts for fantasy, averages those rankings and puts them where they are. And the experts are saying that this is 55 spots ahead of where you will see him on your draft boards the day of draft day. Nico Collins is a 6'4" receiver with a 4.4 40 time, going into being the wide receiver 1 after Brandon Cooks has left on a team with an easy strength of schedule that is going to be playing behind in most games. I'm not saying I love Nico Collins to be your wide receiver 2, but you're taking him as the 6th receiver for your team off the board at this. You got the size, you got the speed, you got the game script, you got the wide receiver 1. You don't have that combination in a lot of players this late in the draft. So for me, I think it's a no-doubter. And if he absolutely sucks 3 weeks into the season, there's no problem for you to cut him, unless if they're playing Davis Mills. Because I don't know if you saw this report, Nick, but Davis Mills is getting all the first reps at practice for some odd reason.
Right, yeah.
So makes sense to Texans players. The guy I don't like, which I might expect Nick to say he does like here, is Damian Harris. He has always
No,
been an
no love
inefficient
for him.
runner. He's always been an inefficient runner. Josh Allen takes a lot of those touches. James Cook, he's not a great running back either, but I do think they're going to try and bring somebody in. I think Dalvin Cook is a domino that needs to fall, and then you're going to see Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt. Those guys will get signed before the season, or at least they should. I think Kareem Hunt's a great fit for the Buffalo Bills in that offense. But I don't think Damian Harris, an inefficient runner, is going to be the formula for your fantasy success. I always say you're going to want to draft a guy that you can feel comfortable playing. I never think there's going to be a week where you say, "Ooh, yeah, Damian Harris, I get to plug in." Like, no, it's not going to happen.
So I'm going to follow the money. Jamal Williams. The Saints paid him. They know that Kamara has a little bit of off the court stuff. He's getting a little bit older. Last year at 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns. I don't see him catching a lot of balls because Kamara will get those, but I still think he gets the red zone looks. Just a touchdown vulture that you're getting for running back depth in round 12. I don't hate it. Player that I don't like though is Alan Lazard. He played with Aaron Rodgers last year, 788 and 6 touchdowns. Well, why should I assume he does better with the Jets? Garrett Wilson's their wide receiver 1. Lazard was supposed to be the wide receiver 1 for the Packers last year and ended up not being wide receiver 1. Jets defense is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Rodgers probably only has to put up 17 points a game. That's 2 touchdowns. How many of those 2 touchdowns will go to Lazard? Probably under 6, which he had last year. So you're drafting a guy who's probably not going to get a lot of targets, not a lot of touchdown upside. And I'm not going to say the Jets are going to kill teams, but I just don't see a lot of like close shootout games happening with that defense.
I agree with that.
So I'm not anti-Jets, but I'm anti everybody except for Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's, a fair take. And to be fair, with the Chiefs, I'm only in on Mahomes and Kelsey. So that's
I agree with you on that. And the Jets did bring in a lot of wide receiver depth this year. I'm very concerned at who's going to be the 2. Garrett Wilson's clearly the one. Me and you are both all in.
I don't think there's a 2 to draft. I think they'll all be fine.
Exactly.
From a football perspective, they're going to be good. But from a fantasy perspective, I don't think you want the wide receiver 2 of a Jet.
So here are all the wide receiver potential 2s or guys that are going to rotate with Garrett Wilson on the field. So Corey Davis, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, is going to have a 2 touchdown game at some point this season. McCole Hardman, who they brought in. They just got rid of Elijah Moore and Mims because they were just headaches in the locker room. And they drafted a rookie receiver. So, and they signed an undrafted receiver and paid him like a 4th round draft pick. So you're talking about now 7 guys that are fighting for a wide receiver 2 spot that seem to have some level of credibility, whether it be with Rodgers or for the team. So I totally agree with you. I'm not biting on a Jets wide receiver 2.
Alrighty. Well, those are our best values and worst values for rounds 1 to 2 of your fantasy drafts based on PPR in a 10-round fantasy draft. So let us know what you like about our picks, dislike about our picks. Talk to us. We'd appreciate that. You can find us on all social media channels. Twitter and Instagram is PrimeTime FF Pod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you enjoyed the show and you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much. Drop a like on this video. Drop a comment. Share the links, let your friends know. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, which you can on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We really would appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you for talking with us. We'll talk to you guys soon. It's draft season, and we're going to help you guys get through it.